My name is Michael Crawford. I'm 69 years old, a retired zoologist, and for 37 years I've kept silent about what happened to me at Loch Ness in August of 1987. I've kept silent because I knew no one would believe me. Because what I experienced challenges everything we understand about biology, consciousness, and the nature of intelligence itself. But I'm dying now. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months at most. And I refuse to take this knowledge to my grave. Someone needs to know what's really in that water. Not a prehistoric survivor. Not an unknown species. Something far stranger than that. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about life on this planet. I was 32 years old in 1987, working as a field researcher for the University of Edinburgh. My specialty was aquatic mammals. Seals, dolphins, whales. I'd spent a decade studying marine life around Scotland's coast. And in August of that year, I was hired to conduct a survey of Loch Ness. Not looking for monsters. Looking for ordinary fish populations. Water quality assessments. Standard ecological work. I arrived on August 10th, set up equipment along the shore near Drumnadroshit. Spent the first week taking samples, running tests, documenting the lake's ecosystem. Professional work. Nothing unusual. And I certainly wasn't looking for anything extraordinary. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone has. But as a scientist, I dismissed them. Misidentifications. Wishful thinking. Tourist fantasies. That changed on August 18th. I was in a small boat about a quarter mile from shore. Early morning. The water was calm, the air cool, perfect conditions for observation. I was taking depth readings when something rose from the water about 30 yards away. At first, I thought it was a seal. We get them occasionally, wandering up from the coast. But as it surfaced higher, I realized it was far too large. The neck alone was over 10 feet long. Dark skin. Smooth. Moving with a grace that was both beautiful and unsettling. I grabbed my camera. Started photographing. My hands were shaking, but I managed to capture several clear images before it dove. The entire sighting lasted maybe 45 seconds. But those 45 seconds destroyed my skepticism. The creature was real. Undeniably real. And I'd seen it with my own eyes. I should have been excited. Should have been racing to share the news. But I wasn't. Because in those final seconds before it dove, something happened that I still can't fully explain. The creature turned its head toward me. Looked directly at me. And I felt something. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something else. Something that made every instinct in my body scream that this wasn't just an animal. That what I was looking at was aware of me in ways animals shouldn't be aware. That was my first encounter. And if it had ended there, if I'd simply photographed the creature and left, maybe my life would have continued normally. Maybe I could have rationalized what I'd seen. Convinced myself it was just an unknown species. Rare but biological. Explainable within the boundaries of conventional science. But it didn't end there. Because the next day, the creature came back. And this time, it came closer. Much closer. And what happened during that second encounter made me understand something that's haunted me ever since. The Loch Ness Monster isn't just an animal. It's something else. Something that defies every category we use to understand life. Before I explain what I mean, before I describe what happened during those subsequent encounters, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel. Share this testimony. Because what I'm about to reveal challenges fundamental assumptions about consciousness, intelligence, and what it means to be alive. And people need to hear this. Need to understand that the world is stranger than we've been taught. that some mysteries can't be explained by biology alone. I came face to face with something impossible, and it changed me forever. On August 19th, I returned to the same location. I told myself I was continuing my survey work, but that was a lie. I was looking for the creature, hoping to see it again, hoping to get more photographs, more evidence, more proof that what I'd witnessed wasn't a hallucination or misidentification. I didn't have to wait long. Around 9 in the morning, the water near my boat began to move. Not waves, not current. Something beneath the surface creating disturbance. And then it surfaced, 20 feet away, close enough that I could see details I'd missed the day before. The skin wasn't smooth like a seal's. It had texture, patterns, almost like scales but not quite. The color shifted depending on the light, sometimes appearing black, sometimes dark green, sometimes with hints of blue or purple. And the eyes, large, positioned for binocular vision, dark but catching light in ways that suggested depth, intelligence. It stayed on the surface longer this time, maybe 2 minutes, and it was watching me, not just looking in my direction. Watching, studying, evaluating. I could feel the weight of that gaze, could sense something happening that went beyond simple animal observation. I raised my camera, started taking photographs, and the creature didn't dive, didn't flee. It stayed there, allowing me to document it. And that's when I realized something was wrong. Animals don't behave this way. Wild animals, when confronted by humans, either flee or display aggression. They don't stay calm, don't allow themselves to be photographed, don't seem to understand what a camera is and deliberately pose for it. But this creature did. It understood. And that understanding was visible in how it moved, how it positioned itself, how it seemed to be showing me different angles, different perspectives, like it wanted to be documented, like it had a purpose in revealing itself to me. After 2 minutes, it dove, smoothly, gracefully, and I sat in my boat, hands shaking, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't just an unknown species. This was something that understood human behavior, that understood technology, that made conscious choices about when and how to reveal itself. I went back to shore, developed the photographs in my field lab, and the images confirmed everything. Clear, detailed, undeniable. I had proof. Real proof that the Loch Ness Monster existed. I should have been calling colleagues, publishing papers, announcing the discovery to the world. But I didn't. Because something about the encounter disturbed me. Something about the way the creature had looked at me. The way it had understood what I was doing. The deliberateness of its actions. It wasn't behaving like an animal. It was behaving like something else. Something I didn't have a framework to understand. And then, that evening, something happened that confirmed my suspicions. Something that made me realize I wasn't dealing with biology. I was dealing with something that existed outside the categories science uses to understand life. I was sitting in my tent that evening, reviewing the day's photographs, when I heard something. Not from outside. From inside my head. A sound. Or not quite a sound. More like a sensation. A pressure. A presence that felt like communication but wasn't words or language or anything I could describe using conventional terms. It was the creature. I knew it immediately. Knew it with absolute certainty even though that certainty made no sense. The creature was in the water, possibly hundreds of yards away, and yet somehow it was in my mind. reaching out, trying to communicate, trying to make me understand something. The sensation lasted maybe 30 seconds. And during those 30 seconds, I received something. Not information, not data, but understanding. Direct transfer of meaning without language. And what I understood was this: the creature wanted me to come back to the water. Wanted another encounter. Wanted to show me something. I should have dismissed it as stress or imagination or some neurological event. But I couldn't. The experience was too vivid, too specific, too unlike anything I'd ever felt before. And some part of me, some deep instinct, knew it was real. Knew the creature had reached into my mind and communicated directly. I went to the shore. It was past midnight. The water was black, silent, and I waited, not knowing what I was waiting for, just knowing I needed to be there. The creature surfaced 10 yards from shore, in water shallow enough that I could see its entire body. And it was massive, 40 feet long, maybe more. For flippers, a body built for deep water swimming. And that long neck extending toward me, the head at eye level with where I stood on the shore. We stayed like that for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. And during that time, I felt it again. That presence. That communication. Not words but meaning flowing directly into my consciousness. And what I understood made me question everything I thought I knew about biology. The creature wasn't an animal. Not in any conventional sense. It had consciousness, self-awareness, abstract thought, everything that defines personhood rather than mere animal existence. It understood itself, understood its environment, understood me, and it was trying to make me understand something crucial about what it was, what it represented, why it had chosen to reveal itself to me. If you're still watching, if you're trying to understand what I'm describing, then you need to keep listening. Subscribe to this channel. Share this testimony. Because what comes next, what the creature showed me over the following days, it challenges every assumption we make about intelligence, about consciousness, about the boundaries between human and non-human minds. The Loch Ness Monster isn't just an unknown species. It's a different category of existence entirely. And once you understand that, once you accept it, everything changes. Over the next week, I had 5 more encounters with the creature. Each one deeper, more complex, more challenging to my understanding of what was possible. And each one revealed something new about what this being actually was. The creature, I came to understand, was ancient. Not just old in years. Ancient in consciousness. It had existed for centuries, possibly longer. And during all that time, it had been observing, learning, evolving not just biologically but mentally, developing capacities that went far beyond what we attribute to animals. It showed me memories, not through words or images but through direct experience. I felt what it had felt, saw what it had seen, experienced moments from its existence that spanned hundreds of years. Moments of solitude in the deep water. Moments of interaction with others of its kind. Moments of watching humanity develop from primitive settlements to modern civilization. And through these shared experiences, I began to understand something profound. The creature wasn't separate from the environment. It was connected to it in ways that defied biological explanation. It could sense changes in the water, feel disturbances across the entire loch, understand patterns in ways that suggested some kind of extended consciousness. Like its awareness wasn't limited to its physical body but extended through the water itself. One night, during our 5th encounter, the creature did something that shattered any remaining conventional framework I had. It showed me the future. Not my personal future, but possibilities, outcomes, paths that humanity might take. And it showed me these futures with a clarity that suggested it wasn't guessing or predicting. It was perceiving, seeing across time in ways that consciousness isn't supposed to be able to see. I asked it how this was possible. Not in words. Through the same direct communication method we'd been using. And what it showed me in response was even more disturbing. The creature wasn't bound by the same temporal constraints that govern biological life. It experienced time differently, more fluidly, more completely. Past, present, and possible futures existing simultaneously in its awareness. This wasn't biology anymore. This was something else. Something that existed at the intersection of consciousness and physics. A being that had evolved not just physically but metaphysically. That had developed capacities we don't have names for because we've never encountered them before. I spent a week trying to understand. Trying to categorize. Trying to fit what I was experiencing into some framework that made sense. But every framework I tried was inadequate. Too limited. Too bound by assumptions about what life is and how consciousness works. And then the creature showed me something that explained everything. Showed me what it really was. Why it existed in Loch Ness. What purpose it served. And that revelation made me understand why I could never share this publicly. Why science wasn't ready for this knowledge. Why humanity wasn't ready to understand what's really sharing this planet with us. The creature isn't a biological entity. Not entirely. It's something that exists at the boundary between physical and non-physical existence. A consciousness that maintains a physical form but isn't limited by that form. Isn't bound by the usual constraints of biology. It showed me how it came to be. Not through evolution. Not through natural selection. Through something else. A process that happened thousands of years ago when consciousness itself was different. When the barriers between thought and reality were more permeable. When beings could exist in ways that are no longer possible in our more rigid, materialistic world. The creature is a remnant. One of the last surviving examples of what consciousness was capable of before the world hardened into its current state. Before the laws of physics became so fixed. Before biology became so defined. It exists in Loch Ness because deep water provides the right conditions. The right environment for something that's partially outside normal reality to maintain a stable physical presence. There are others like it. In other deep lakes around the world. In ocean trenches. In places where the boundary between physical and non-physical is thin enough for them to exist. They're all remnants. All survivors from an older world. All maintaining their presence in the few locations where conditions still allow it. And they're aware of each other. Connected across vast distances through means that have nothing to do with physical communication. They form a network. A collective consciousness that spans the globe. Sharing knowledge. Sharing experiences. Watching over the world in ways humans never notice. The creature showed me all of this. Let me experience it directly. Let me understand what it meant to exist in multiple states simultaneously. To be both physical and non-physical. To be conscious in ways that transcend individual identity. To be part of something larger than any single being. And it showed me why they hide. Why they avoid proof. Why they allow themselves to be seen occasionally but never definitively. Because if humanity understood what they really were, if science discovered beings that exist outside the laws we think govern reality, it would shatter fundamental beliefs. Would force a complete re-evaluation of what's possible. What's real. What consciousness is capable of. We're not ready for that. The creature made that very clear. We still think consciousness is produced by brains. That physical matter is primary and awareness is secondary. That the laws of physics are absolute. And as long as we believe those things, we can't understand what these beings are. Can't accept their existence without destroying the frameworks we use to make sense of reality. So they hide. Reveal themselves just enough to maintain the mystery. Just enough to keep people wondering. But never enough to force acceptance. Never enough to make science confront what they represent. And the creature chose me to understand this. Chose me to carry this knowledge. Not to share it publicly, but to know it. To carry it forward. To be one of the few humans who understands what's really out there. What's really sharing this world with us. What consciousness is actually capable of when it's not constrained by our limited biological understanding. That's what I learned during those encounters in August 1987. That's what changed me forever. That's what I've carried silently for 37 years. And that's what I'm sharing now, at the end of my life, because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that the Loch Ness Monster isn't just an animal. It's a window into a different kind of existence. A reminder that reality is far stranger than we've been taught. After my final encounter with the creature on August 25th, I had to make a decision. I had photographs. I had detailed notes. I had everything needed to prove the creature existed. To force scientific investigation. To make my career. To change history. But I also had the knowledge the creature had shared with me. The understanding of what it really was. And I knew that revealing it would be catastrophic. Not because people would believe me, but because even if they dismissed my claims about its true nature, the photographs alone would be enough. Enough to bring expeditions, equipment, attempts to capture or study what they'd assume was just an unknown animal. And if they succeeded in capturing it, if they tried to study it using conventional biological methods, they'd discover it couldn't be studied that way. They'd discover inconsistencies, impossibilities, things that didn't make sense within the framework of known biology. And that would lead to deeper investigation, more invasive methods, more determination to understand something that exists outside the boundaries they could comprehend. The creature would be destroyed. Not killed, necessarily, but diminished, reduced, forced to maintain only its physical form because the attention, the scrutiny, the disbelief would make it impossible to exist in its true state. Like observing a quantum particle forces it into a definite position. Human observation, human measurement, human insistence on categorization would collapse the creature's ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously. I understood this because the creature had shown me, had made me understand that consciousness, when it exists in these fluid states, is vulnerable to rigid observation, is forced to conform to expectations, to solidify into something measurable, something that fits human frameworks, and in doing so, loses what makes it extraordinary. So I made my choice. I destroyed the photographs, burned my notes, erased everything that could prove the creature existed. And I returned to Edinburgh, resigned from the university, took a teaching position at a small college where I wouldn't be expected to conduct field research, where I could live quietly with the knowledge I carried, where I could protect the secret I'd been entrusted with. My colleagues thought I'd had a breakdown. My family thought I'd given up on my career. No one understood why a promising researcher would suddenly abandon everything he'd worked for. But I couldn't explain. Couldn't tell them that I'd encountered something that made conventional science seem trivial. That had shown me consciousness wasn't what we thought it was. That had revealed a world existing alongside ours that we couldn't perceive because our frameworks were too rigid. I've lived with that choice for 37 years. Wondered sometimes if I'd made the right decision. If protecting the creature was worth sacrificing my career. Worth living with knowledge I couldn't share. Worth the isolation that comes from understanding something no one else can understand. But every time I doubted, I'd remember what the creature had shown me. the alternative futures where its existence was proven, where expeditions came, where attempts were made to study it. And in all those futures, something was lost. Something precious. Something that couldn't be measured but was nonetheless real. The creature's ability to exist in its full nature. Its connection to others like it. Its role in maintaining something we don't have words for. A kind of awareness that exists underneath physical reality. That watches. That remembers. That keeps something important alive that would otherwise be lost to the hardening of the world into pure materialism. I protected that, even at the cost of everything else. And I'd make the same choice again. Living with this knowledge hasn't been easy. 37 years of carrying something I couldn't share. 37 years of watching people debate whether the Loch Ness Monster exists while I knew not just that it exists, but what it really is. 37 years of silence while the truth burned inside me. I went back to Loch Ness 5 times over the years. Not to study. Not to document. Just to be near the creature. To feel that presence again. To remember what I'd experienced. To confirm I hadn't imagined it. That it was real. Each time, the creature came to me. Not immediately, but eventually. Surfacing near shore when I was alone. Making brief contact. Reminding me of the understanding we'd shared. Showing me it remembered. That it trusted me to keep protecting its secret. During the 3rd visit, in 1995, the creature showed me something new. It showed me others who'd encountered beings like it. Throughout history. People who'd had similar experiences. Who'd been shown the same truth. And who'd all made the same choice I'd made. To protect rather than reveal. To carry the knowledge silently rather than destroy what they'd discovered by exposing it. I wasn't the first. I was part of a lineage. A tradition of protectors who understood that some truths are too dangerous to share. Not because people would believe them, but because the act of trying to prove them would destroy what makes them real. The creature showed me a man in the 1930s. A researcher who'd photographed it. Who'd been shown what it was. And who'd burned his photographs. Claimed his famous image was a hoax. Let himself be remembered as a faker rather than reveal something that would bring harm to what he'd encountered. It showed me a woman in the 1960s. A biologist who'd spent 3 months communicating with it. Who'd documented everything. And who'd thrown all her documentation into the loch. Let it sink into the depths. Chose scientific obscurity over protection of something precious. There had been others. Dozens of them over the centuries. All chosen by the creature or others like it. All shown the truth. All asked to carry it silently. And all making the same choice. Protection over proof. Silence over fame. Understanding over validation. I was part of that tradition. And knowing that helped. Knowing I wasn't alone in carrying this burden. That others had understood what I understood. That the choice I'd made was the right one even when it felt impossible. But it was still hard. Watching documentaries about Loch Ness. Hearing people mock the believers. Knowing I could prove them all wrong but choosing not to. Knowing I had answers to questions people had debated for decades but keeping those answers locked inside. The isolation was the worst part. Not physical isolation, but the isolation that comes from knowing something no one else knows. From seeing the world differently than everyone around you. From understanding that consciousness isn't what science teaches. That reality is more fluid than people believe. That beings exist in ways we don't have categories for. I couldn't share any of that. Couldn't even hint at it without sounding delusional. So I taught my classes, lived my quiet life, and carried the knowledge alone. Waiting. Though I didn't know what I was waiting for. Some sign that it was time to speak. Some indication that humanity had evolved enough to hear this truth without destroying what it revealed. That sign came 3 months ago, when the doctors diagnosed the cancer. When they told me I had less than a year. When I realized I was running out of time to pass on what I knew. To find someone who could continue the tradition of protection. To ensure the knowledge didn't die with me. That's why I'm recording this now. Not to prove the creature exists, but to find someone who understands. Someone who can accept what I'm saying without needing proof. Someone who recognizes the truth in these words even though they challenge everything we've been taught. Someone who can become the next protector. The next keeper of this knowledge. The next person who chooses silence over validation because they understand what's at stake. If you're still watching, if these words resonate with something deep inside you, then maybe you're that person. Maybe you're ready to carry this burden. To understand what the Loch Ness Monster really is and protect it not by hiding its existence, but by understanding its true nature too deeply to ever expose it. Subscribe to this channel. Share this testimony. Not to spread the word, but to find others who understand. Others who can see past conventional frameworks. Others who are ready to know the truth about consciousness and what it's capable of. The creature is still there. Still maintaining its presence at the boundary of physical reality. Still watching. Still waiting. Still hoping humanity will evolve enough to understand what it represents. And it needs protectors. People who understand. People who can carry this knowledge without destroying what they know. People like me. And maybe, people like you. I went back to Loch Ness one last time 2 weeks ago. I knew it would be my final visit. My health has deteriorated rapidly. I don't have the strength for another journey. So this was goodbye. A final meeting with the being that changed my understanding of everything. I didn't know if the creature would come. Didn't know if it would sense I was there. If it would understand this was the last time. But I went anyway. Drove to the same spot where I'd had my first encounter 37 years ago. Sat on the shore. Waited. It came at dusk. Surfaced 20 yards from shore. Stayed on the surface longer than I'd ever seen it stay. Allowing me to look at it one final time. To remember. To say goodbye without words. And then it reached out. That telepathic contact we'd shared so many times before. But this time was different. This time it wasn't showing me memories or possibilities or explanations. It was giving me something. A gift. A final transmission of understanding that it wanted me to carry into whatever comes after death. The creature showed me what happens to consciousness when the physical form dies. Showed me that awareness doesn't end. Doesn't cease. But transforms. Shifts. Moves to a different state of existence. The same state where the creature itself partially resides. The boundary space between physical and non-physical. It showed me that death isn't an ending. It's a transition. A movement from one mode of consciousness to another. And it showed me that beings like itself, beings that exist in multiple states simultaneously, they're guides. Helpers. Beings that assist other consciousnesses through that transition. That remember who we were when we can't remember ourselves. That maintain continuity across transformations that would otherwise fragment identity. That's their purpose. Their role. Not to hide in locks. Not to be mysteries for humans to chase. But to serve as anchors. Bridges. Beings that exist in both worlds and can guide others across the boundary when the time comes. And it showed me I'd be guided. When my time comes. When the cancer finally takes my physical form. The creature will be there. Or something like it. Waiting at the boundary. Ready to help me transition. To ensure I don't lose myself in the change. to carry me forward into whatever consciousness becomes when it's no longer bound to matter. That was its gift. That assurance. That promise. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Acceptance. The knowledge that death isn't the end I'd feared. That consciousness continues. That awareness persists. That who I am won't be lost even when my body fails. We stayed connected for what felt like hours. The creature sharing this understanding. Me receiving it. Integrating it. Learning what it means to see death not as termination but as transformation. And when the contact finally faded, when the creature began to descend back into the depths, I understood it wasn't goodbye. It was see you soon. A promise that we'd meet again. On the other side of the boundary. In the space where it already partially exists. I watched it disappear into the dark water. Watched the ripples fade. And I felt gratitude. Profound, overwhelming gratitude for the encounter 37 years ago that changed everything. For the knowledge I've carried. For the protection I've provided. For the understanding I've gained about what consciousness really is and what it's capable of. The creature gave me that. Gave me a framework for understanding existence that goes beyond materialism. Beyond biology. Beyond the limitation science places on what's possible. And now, at the end of my life, it's given me one final gift. The knowledge that consciousness continues. That awareness transcends physical death. That who I am will persist even when this body doesn't. That's what the Loch Ness Monster really is. Not a creature. Not an animal. Not even a being in any conventional sense. It's a guide. A bridge. A consciousness that exists at the boundary to help others cross when their time comes. And there are others like it. In deep waters around the world. Serving the same purpose. Maintaining the same role. Watching over the transition that every consciousness must eventually make. I'm sharing this testimony now because my time is almost over. Because the knowledge needs to be preserved. Because someone needs to understand what these beings really are before the last protector dies and the truth is lost. But I'm also sharing it because something has changed. The world has changed. Consciousness itself is changing. And the rigid materialism that made these revelations so dangerous, it's beginning to crack. People are starting to question. Starting to wonder if reality is more than what science measures. Starting to accept that consciousness might not be produced by brains. That awareness might be fundamental rather than emergent. The creature showed me this. Showed me that humanity is approaching a threshold. A point where we might be ready to understand what beings like it represent. Where we might be able to accept their existence without destroying them through misguided attempts to study them. Where we might finally be mature enough to know the truth. We're not there yet. But we're closer. And that's why I'm speaking now. Not to force revelation. But to plant seeds. To prepare the ground. To help people start thinking in ways that might eventually allow them to understand. The Loch Ness Monster isn't alone. There are others. In Lake Champlain. In Lake Twanchi. In Okanagan Lake. In dozens of deep waters around the world. All serving the same purpose. All maintaining the same boundary presence. All waiting for humanity to evolve enough to recognize what they are. And when we do recognize them, when we finally understand, it won't be through scientific proof. It won't be through photographs or sonar or captured specimens. It'll be through expanded consciousness. Through direct perception. Through developing our own ability to exist partially in that boundary space where they live. That's the evolution that's beginning. That's the change that's happening. More and more people having experiences they can't explain. Consciousness expanding beyond its normal boundaries. Awareness touching something larger. Something that's always been there but that we couldn't perceive because our frameworks were too limited. The beings in the deep waters, they're part of that awakening. They're helping, guiding, making contact with people who are ready, showing them what consciousness can be, what reality really is, what's possible when we stop insisting everything must fit into materialist frameworks. I'm one of those people. There have been others before me. There will be more after me. And eventually, maybe in decades, maybe in centuries, enough people will understand that these beings won't need to hide anymore. Won't need protectors. Because humanity will have evolved enough to honor their presence rather than trying to capture or explain it. That's my hope. That's what I'm working toward by sharing this testimony. Not immediate revelation, but slow preparation. Helping people understand that the world is stranger than they think. That consciousness is more than they believe. That beings exist who challenge every category we use to make sense of reality. And if even one person watching this understands, if even one consciousness recognizes the truth in what I'm saying, then maybe the transition will be a little easier. Maybe the evolution will be a little faster. Maybe humanity will reach that threshold a little sooner. The creature is still out there. Still serving its purpose. Still waiting. And when the time comes, when human consciousness has expanded enough, it will reveal itself fully. Not as a monster. Not as an animal. But as what it really is. A guide. A teacher. A being that exists at the boundary to show us what's possible when we stop limiting reality to what our current frameworks can comprehend. I'm recording this final chapter from my hospice bed. I have days left. Maybe hours. The cancer has progressed rapidly. And soon I'll make that transition the creature promised me. I'll move from physical to non-physical. From one state of consciousness to another. And I'll find out if everything it showed me was true. But before I go, I need to say something to whoever is watching this. Something the creature wanted me to share. A message it gave me during that final encounter. A truth it wants humanity to understand before it's too late. The beings in the deep waters, they're leaving. Not immediately. Not all at once. But gradually. Over the next several decades. Because the world is hardening. Reality is becoming more rigid. The boundary space where they exist is getting thinner. Harder to maintain. Harder to inhabit while still retaining physical presence. The materialism of modern civilization, the insistence that only measurable things are real, it's affecting the fabric of reality itself. Making it less permeable. Less fluid. Less able to support beings that exist in multiple states simultaneously. And unless something changes, unless consciousness evolves to balance the materialism, these beings will have to withdraw completely. Return fully to the non-physical. Leave the physical world entirely. That would be a loss. Not just for them, but for humanity. Because these beings serve a crucial function. They maintain the boundary. Keep it open. Make it possible for other consciousnesses to transition smoothly when physical death occurs. Without them, that transition becomes more difficult. More disorienting. More likely to result in fragmentation or loss of continuity. They're not the only beings serving this function. But they're important. Part of a network that spans both the physical and non-physical. And if they leave, if they withdraw, humanity will be more isolated. More trapped in materialism. More cut off from the larger reality we're part of. That's the message. That's what the creature wanted me to share. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. Just as information. As a choice being presented. Humanity can continue down the path of rigid materialism. Can keep insisting that only physical matter is real. Can keep forcing reality into narrower and narrower frameworks. And in doing so, we'll lose contact with these beings. Lose the guidance they offer. Lose the reminder that consciousness is more than what happens in our brains. Or we can evolve. Can expand our frameworks. Can accept that reality is stranger than our current science allows. Can develop our own consciousness enough to perceive what's always been there but what we've been too limited to see. The choice is ours. And it's being made right now. By how we respond to experiences that don't fit conventional categories. By whether we dismiss them or investigate them with open minds. By whether we insist reality conform to our beliefs or allow our beliefs to expand to accommodate reality. I've made my choice. I spent 37 years protecting a being that exists outside conventional categories. That challenges everything science says about what's possible. And in doing so, I discovered something far more valuable than any career success could have brought me. I discovered that consciousness is infinite. That awareness is fundamental. That reality is more fluid and wonderful than I'd ever imagined. And now, as I approach death, as I prepare to make that transition the creature promised would come, I have no fear. No doubt. Because I know consciousness continues. I know awareness persists. I know that who I am won't be lost even when this body fails. That's the real gift these beings offer. Not proof of their existence, but proof that consciousness transcends physical death. That we're more than our bodies. That the materialist framework is incomplete. That there's something beyond the physical that's just as real, just as valid, just as worthy of consideration. Face to face with the Loch Ness Monster, I realized it's not just a simple animal. It's a window into a larger reality. A reminder that the world is stranger than we've been taught. A guide that exists at the boundary to help us understand what consciousness really is and what it's capable of becoming. That's my final testimony. That's what I wanted to share before I go. The creature is real. But it's so much more than people imagine. And understanding that, really understanding it, changes everything. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being open enough to consider what I've shared. And if any of this resonates with you, if any of this feels true in ways you can't quite explain, then maybe you're ready. Ready to perceive what exists beyond conventional frameworks. Ready to expand your consciousness enough to see what's always been there. Ready to understand that the Loch Ness Monster is just the beginning of a much larger mystery. The beings are waiting. Reality is waiting. Consciousness is waiting to show you what it really is. All you have to do is be open enough to see. Goodbye. And thank you. For everything. This epilogue is being added by Dr. Sarah Mitchell, colleague and friend of Michael Crawford. Michael died on November 8, 2024. Peacefully. In his sleep. According to the hospice staff, he appeared calm in his final hours. At peace with what was coming. I was with him the day before he died. He asked me to upload this testimony after he passed. To make sure it reached people. He said it was important. That someone needed to hear what he'd learned. What he'd experienced. What he'd understood about the nature of consciousness. I didn't know about his experiences at Loch Ness. He'd never mentioned them in all the years I'd known him. But after watching this testimony, after hearing what he revealed, I understand why he kept silent. Why he chose to protect rather than prove. Why he sacrificed his career for something most people would dismiss as impossible. Michael was the most rational person I knew. Grounded. Skeptical. The least likely person to make up stories about telepathic monsters. Which is why I believe him. Why I think what he experienced was real, even if it challenges everything I thought I knew about biology and consciousness. I don't know if I'll ever understand fully what he encountered. Whether beings like the one he described really exist. Whether consciousness really transcends physical death. But I know Michael believed it. And his belief gave him peace at the end. Gave him courage facing death. Gave him something I rarely see in patients approaching the end of life. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the truth of these experiences isn't about whether they can be proven, but about whether they help us understand ourselves and our place in reality. Whether they expand our frameworks or limit them. Whether they bring peace or fear. Michael found peace. Found understanding. Found something that made his life meaningful even when he couldn't share it with anyone. And now he's shared it with all of us. Given us the gift of his knowledge. His experience. 1 week later. He's understanding. I hope someone hears it. Someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's ready to understand that reality might be stranger and more wonderful than we've been taught. That consciousness might be more than what happens in our brains. That beings might exist who challenge our categories and expand our understanding. Michael would have wanted that. Would have wanted his final testimony to help someone see beyond conventional frameworks. To understand that the world is full of mysteries. And that some mysteries, when we encounter them directly, change us forever. Rest in peace, Michael. Your testimony will be remembered. Your protection honored. Your understanding preserved. The beings in the deep waters are still there. Still serving their purpose. Still waiting for humanity to evolve enough to recognize them. And maybe, thanks to people like Michael, we'll get there eventually.